Caesar by William Shakespeare. Shakespeare is widely regarded as one of the most authoritative dramatists in the English language. He wrote many plays during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I and King James I. These plays were performed in the Globe Theatre by Shakespeare's playing company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men, later known as the King's Men. Shakespearean plays are broadly classified as comedies, histories, and tragedies. Julius Caesar is a tragedy play written by Shakespeare in 1599. It is based on the conspiracy and assassination of the Roman general Julius Caesar and the subsequent defeat of his conspirators. Let's now look at some important scenes in Act 2 of the play. The main characters in Act 2 are Roman General Julius Caesar and senators Mark Antony, Cassius, and Marcus Brutus. Here are the main events which take place in Act 2. Julius Caesar's wife, Calphurnia, narrates her ominous dream and pleads with him not to go out. Caesar, however, dismisses all his fears and, encouraged by another senator, Decius Brutus, decides to leave for the Senate, where he has to be crowned. Act 2, Scene 1 takes place inside the Senate. The scene opens with the conspirators gathered around Caesar pretending to plead a case. Senator Metellus Cimber approaches Caesar and falls on his feet to plead for the return of his exiled brother, Publius Cimber. Caesar dismisses his requests, saying that bows and courtesies excite ordinary men, but not him. Further, he insults Metellus by telling him that if he begs for his brother, he will be kicked out like a dog. This conversation projects Caesar as very dictatorial and egoistic. Later, Marcus Brutus and Cassius also kneel at Caesar's feet to repeat Metellus' plea. Caesar, however, remains unmoved and says, "This speech of Caesar is very pompous and highlights his pride and conceit." It is also very ironic because Caesar calls himself firm and unmoved, but he is soon attacked by the conspiring senators and killed. The last line uttered by Caesar when Brutus stabs him is very significant. He says, "Even you, Brutus." Then, "Fall Caesar." This sentence underlines the shock and horror of Caesar on discovering that his closest friend Marcus Brutus is also one of the conspirators. The conspirators, meanwhile, proclaim the victory of liberty and freedom and defeat of tyranny. Now, Mark Antony enters the Senate and sees Caesar's corpse. He's amazed to see how a great man with so many glories and conquests to his name now lies shrunk on a small piece of land. He tells the conspirators that if they mean to kill him, then they must do it at once. He feels that there will not be a better place or better method of death than to be killed by them besides Caesar, who is the greatest man of this time. Brutus, however, tells Antony not to beg for death. He further says that the conspirators may appear bloody and cruel because Antony sees his hands but not their painful hearts. It is interesting to note how Brutus justifies his act of violence in the name of patriotism. Next, Mark Antony addresses the departed spirit of Caesar and shakes hands with the conspirators, even though he is also repentant on doing so. Here's what Mark Antony says to the conspirators and dead Caesar at this juncture.
My reputation now stands on slippery ground, and you must consider me in either of the two bad ways, as a coward or as a flatterer. O Caesar, it's true that I loved you. Won't your spirit be grieved more than your death to see Antony making peace and shaking the bloody fingers of your enemies?
It is evident from Antony's speech that at this point he feels helpless and finds his reputation to be on a slippery ground or prone to blemish. He thinks that he may be branded as either a coward or a flatterer. Even when Antony has joined the conspirators, he shows his love for Caesar and is worried how Caesar's spirit will perceive him. On hearing Antony, Cassius questions his loyalty and asks if they could depend on him. However, Antony tells him that he merely forgot himself for a moment on seeing Caesar's body. He also offers to become the friend of the conspirators if they cite reasons why they considered Caesar dangerous. Brutus assures Mark Antony of a satisfactory explanation. Thereafter, Antony asks if Caesar's body can be brought to the marketplace where he is allowed to funeral oration. Brutus agrees, but Cassius advises him against the idea, as he thinks that people will be moved by Mark Antony's words. Brutus then assures Cassius that he will speak before Antony and explain the reason behind Caesar's assassination to the public. Brutus also plans to tell people that Antony has been allowed to speak only by his consent. In doing so, Brutus believes that people will admire his magnanimity for allowing Antony, Caesar's friend, to take part in the funeral. Cassius remains displeased with the idea, but Brutus allows Antony to take Caesar's body and instructs him not to blame them in his speech. After this, everyone departs and only Antony is left behind with Caesar's body. At this point, there is Antony's monologue in which he asks for Caesar's forgiveness for being gentle with his murderers. Antony prophesies that civil conflict will follow Caesar's death and lead to rampant destruction in Rome. He also says that Caesar's ghost will roam around in search of revenge. With the Roman goddess of revenge, Ate, by his side, he will come back from hot hell and cry out havoc in a monarch's voice and unleash the dogs of war. Then, the foul deed of Caesar's murder shall smell above the earth without rotting corpses asking for burial. Antony talks in rage and foretells the destruction and disorder which will befall on Rome due to the angry spirit of Caesar. Cry havoc was a signal given to the English military forces to direct the soldiers. The phrase "dogs of war" refers to the chaos and plunder which Caesar's restless spirit would let loose on Rome. The monologue of Mark Antony reveals a different side of his personality. He comes across as a very practical, clever, and manipulative senator, and also a very loyal friend of Caesar. Gauging the order of the day, he chooses to be with the conspirators. However, Antony's monologue reveals that his loyalty actually lies with Caesar. Therefore, the monologue brings out dramatic irony in the play as the actual thoughts of Mark Antony become evident to the audience but not to the other characters. Let's now move to Act 2, Scene 2 and understand the main speeches. First of all, Marcus Brutus stands on the pulpit to address a group of Roman citizens who are eager to hear him out. He begins by saying,
Roman countrymen and lovers, hear me out for my cause, and be silent so that you may hear. Have trust in my honor, and show respect for my honor, so that you may believe what I'm going to say. Use your wisdom to judge me, and pay attention so that you can be a better judge. If there is anyone in this crowd who's a dear friend of Caesar, to him I can say that Brutus loved Caesar not less than him. If still that friend of Caesar demands why Brutus rose against Caesar, here is my answer. It was not as if I loved Caesar less, but I loved Rome more. Would you have wanted Caesar to live while you died a slave, rather than Caesar dead and you alive as free men? Since Caesar was dear to me, I weep for him. Since he was fortunate, I rejoice at it. Since he was very brave, I honor him. But as he was ambitious, I killed him. I have tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honor for his courage, and death for his ambition. Who amongst you is so morally low that he would prefer to be a slave? If there is someone like that, speak up, as I would have offended him. Who amongst you is as uncivilized that he would prefer not to be a Roman? If any, speak up, for I would have offended him. Who is here so low that he would not love his country? If any of you is, speak, for I have offended that person. I pause for a reply.
The crowd says, "No one, Brutus, no one." Brutus' speech is persuasive and he manages to convince people that Caesar's assassination was an inevitable act required for the well-being of Rome and its people. Using his reputation as an honorable senator to his advantage, Brutus justifies that he killed Julius Caesar because of his love for Rome. He places himself at the same level with ordinary citizens of Rome who had loved and admired Caesar. Then he begins to incite feelings of the Romans against authoritarian Caesar and demands to know if the act of killing him was incorrect. In this way, Brutus clearly elicits the desired response from the people. Thereafter, Mark Antony enters with Caesar's body. Brutus explains to the crowd that Antony had no part in the conspiracy, but that he will now be part of the new Roman Republic. He leaves saying that as he killed his best friend for the good of Rome and has the same dagger for himself when his country decides that it needs his death. People cheer Brutus's apparent kindness, declaring that he should be the next Caesar. The reaction of the crowd indicates their fickle nature and shows how a well-spoken speech can completely manipulate public opinion. People now get ready to listen to Mark Antony, who begins by saying, at this point, people are so fascinated by Brutus's speech that they don't want to hear anything against him. They are convinced that Caesar was a tyrant, so Rome is blessed without him. Understanding the mood of the crowd, Antony walks the tightrope carefully. Let's take a look at his speech now. He says,
Friends, Romans, countrymen, listen to me. I have come to bury Caesar and not to praise him. The evil acts that people commit live after them, but their good things are often buried with their bones. It was the same with Caesar. The noble Brutus has told you that Caesar was ambitious. If it was so, it was a terrible fault, and Caesar paid for this fault terribly. Here, with the permission of Brutus and others, for Brutus is an honorable man, as are all others, I have come to speak on Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, and was faithful and just to me. However, Brutus says he was ambitious, and you know that Brutus is an honorable man. Caesar brought many captives to Rome, whose ransoms filled the government treasury. Did that make Caesar ambitious? When poor people cried, Caesar wept with them. Ambitious people should be sterner. Yet Brutus says Caesar was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. You all saw that on the Lupercal I offered him a kingly crown 3 times, which he refused 3 times. Was this ambition? However, Brutus says that he was ambitious, and surely he is an honorable man. I am not here to disprove what Brutus has said, rather I am here to speak what I know. You all loved him once, for good reasons. Therefore, what reason keeps you from mourning for him today? O judgment, you have run away to dumb animals, and men have lost their intelligence. Bear with me. My heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause until it comes back to me.
Mark Antony makes an emotionally charged rhetorical speech in verse calling Brutus an honorable man time and again. Thus, on the surface, it seems that Mark Antony is with Brutus and other senators and respects them, but at a deeper level, Antony uses the phrase honorable men sarcastically. He also carefully refutes Brutus's allegation that Caesar was ambitious by reminding people of Caesar's noble gestures and also recalls that Caesar had refused the crown thrice. Thus, Antony manipulates the crowd, which slowly begins to sympathize with him and Caesar. While some people still think that Caesar was wrong, some of them believe that someone worse will come in his place. Resuming his speech, Antony says that he would gladly excite people to mutiny and rebellion, but he would not want to harm Brutus or Cassius, for they are honorable men. Then, in a casual manner, he produces Caesar's will and arouses people's curiosity even more as they get restless and implore him to read it. Antony adds fuel to the fire by saying that he cannot read it as that might excite people and make them go mad. The crowd gets enraged and calls the conspirators traitors and demand Antony to read the will. Finally, appearing to look compelled, Antony comes down from the pulpit and asks people to make a circle around Caesar's corpse. The shift in Mark Antony's position brings him physically closer to the people, where he is able to evoke more sympathy for the dead Caesar. Antony points out the wounds that Brutus and Cassius have inflicted on Caesar's body. He reminds the crowd how Caesar had loved Brutus, and yet Brutus stabbed him viciously. In this way, Antony gathers public sympathy by showing the crowd marks of a gruesome murder. Then he uncovers the body of Caesar, on seeing which people weep, become enraged, and begin to talk about revenge and mutiny. Now Antony manipulatively strikes at the right moment with the following speech. Good friends, let me not stir you up to a sudden wave of mutiny.
They who have committed this act are honorable men. Alas, I do not know the private concerns which made them commit this act. They are wise and honorable, and I am sure they will answer you with sufficient reasons. My friends, I have not come to steal away your hearts, as I am not an orator like Brutus. As all of you know me, I am a plain, blunt man who loves his friend, and this is well known by the people who gave me the permission to speak about my friend. Because I don't have intelligence or words or worthiness, action or voice, or the power of speech to stir up men's emotion, I only speak plainly. I will only tell you what you know yourself. I will show you Caesar's wounds, which are like speechless mouths, and let these wounds speak for me. However, if I were Brutus and Brutus was Antony, then that Antony would ruffle up your spirits and put a tongue in every wound of Caesar, and persuade even the stones of Rome to rise in mutiny.
This is a very clever speech by Mark Antony. Firstly, he rejects the idea of mutiny. Secondly, he refers to Brutus as a good orator who can steal people's hearts. Thereby, he implicitly conveys how people have been swayed by the smooth-talking Brutus. He, however, presents himself as a plain, blunt man. He claims that the oratory of Brutus could urge him to rebel. But he is merely Antony. However, by uttering these words, he challenges people and successfully plants the notion of mutiny in their heads. After Antony has spoken, people become aggressive and want to burn down Brutus's house. People are once again all for Caesar. At this point, Antony strategically reads Caesar's will, in which he has bequeathed a sum of money from his personal holdings to every man in Rome. He also reveals Caesar's plans to make his private parks and gardens available for the pleasure of people. The citizens are struck by this act of generosity and swear to avenge selfless Caesar's death. They run in all directions to wreak destruction throughout the city. Antony, on the other hand, stands alone, reflecting what will come of the mischief that he has set loose on Rome. Later on in the play, Antony joins Caesar's nephew, Octavius Caesar, and together they prepare to fight against the conspirators. On the other hand, Brutus and Cassius fall apart as Brutus, who is an idealist, gets angered by Cassius's practicality. Thereafter, the armies of Octavius Caesar and Antony fight against the combined army of Brutus and Cassius. In this battle, Brutus and Cassius are defeated and they commit suicide. Julius Caesar is a strong political play that depicts a real political event in history. In this play, Shakespeare effectively depicts how language is effectively used by politicians to achieve different ends. Brutus uses his carefully crafted speech to incite venomous feelings against Caesar. On the other hand, Mark Antony completely destroys Brutus's mission by evoking sympathy for Caesar and by referring to the conspirators in a mock-praising way. In Julius Caesar, Shakespeare also explores the concepts of patriotism and loyalty. It is these concepts and depiction of political rhetoric and ever-changing public opinion which make this play very topical.